Are you really in love with writing, or have you just got a crush on the idea of being a writer? The reality is, romantic notions of what it means to be a writer rarely match the daily grind. But after building my career in the world of writing, I discovered that there's a big difference between calling oneself a writer and actually getting writing done. And between the wish and the thing, there stands only one obstacle. Some call it resistance, others writer's block. But to overcome it, we're going to look at it right in the face and call it by its true name: fear. So in this video, I'm going to share with you 8 simple, tried and true tips that genuinely helped me overcome the fear of writing that we all go through, and that'll hopefully help you transform from passive consumer to productive writer. And if you're new here, my name's William. I'm an English professor, and I help nonfiction writers write well. So if you want to learn about the art and science of expert writing, be sure to grab my free newsletter, Writer Science. Link is down below the like button. In order to understand these 8 strategies, it's important to point out just how weird it is that in this world of writers, we spend so much energy talking about strategies for how to get writing done. Like, you don't see this in any other profession. Teachers don't talk about how hard it is to get teaching done. We just show up, do the work, and leave. And when you really get down to it, I think this whole genre of writing routines and tactics all comes down to managing the real problem that we all have: fear. There's an old joke about a guy who goes to a doctor and says, "Doc, it hurts when I do this." And the doctor says, "Well, stop doing that." And sometimes I just have to think about taking that advice. Just write the safe stuff that nobody can criticize. It would make everything so much easier. So the question is, why do we keep doing it? Why not stop doing the thing that hurts? I mean, it's not like this is something that's unique to writing. Whenever I sit down to write emails or text messages, I don't feel fear. And whenever I worked as a copywriter, I never felt this way about writing product descriptions. I mean, they can be boring, but they didn't make me worry that readers are going to hate me. So it's only when I want to write something that actually connects with people that this fear sets in. Anytime I want to write something that makes them think differently or helps them solve a problem or just feel less alone. But the fact is, that ambition is why I started writing online in the first place. And without it, I'd just be adding more noise. And I don't really think any of us want to do that. And so what that means is everything that is weak inside of me is fighting against this ambition, this writing. That's the part of me that wants to scroll social media instead of writing. The one that whispers, "Nobody cares what you think." And the part of me that wants to give up and just consume other people's content forever. Now look, your fears might be different, but here's what I know. Every writer who's worth reading is afraid of something. Most people who talk about starting a newsletter or writing a blog never actually do it, and the ones who do often quit after a few months when they realize how hard it is to keep going in public. But the writers who make it aren't always the most talented ones. They're just the ones who figured out how to live with their fear and keep publishing anyway. So how do you do that? How do you keep showing up when everything inside of you wants to hide? Well, as everyone knows, it's helpful to set a schedule, but how often should you write? When should you write? And how many words per day? When William Faulkner was being interviewed by the Paris Review, they asked him whether he writes every day or only when he's inspired. And Faulkner said, "I only write when I'm inspired. Fortunately, I'm inspired at 9 o'clock every morning." And that's a great line, but it's worth reflecting on because, well, look, if you only write when you're inspired, you're never going to get it done. I once read a story about a guy who was trying to quit smoking, and he had tried all the different tactics, the patch and hypnotism and read all the books and everything. He would quit smoking, and then something stressful would happen. And it was always when something stressful would happen that he would start smoking again. And so he realizes that there was this kind of backstop to his quitting smoking. I'm going to quit smoking so long as nothing stressful happens. But if you think about it, what kind of a life is that? Like, if you were going to live the least stressful life possible, that would be one in which both of your parents die. So in other words, you're never going to have an unstressful life, and so therefore you're never going to quit smoking by that logic. So his epiphany was that the only way to quit smoking is to never smoke again. And apparently that worked for him. And I think the same thing holds true for writers, because if your rule is, I'm only going to write so long as there's nothing more important to do, well, good luck with that, because there's always going to be something more important than writing. Writing is probably the least important thing that one could possibly be doing. And so in order to reframe the way that we think about writing, I think what you need to do is invent the person who can do the writing. And so I remember listening to an interview with the Canadian author Sheila Heti, who spoke about this, not inventing the book, but inventing the person who writes the book.
A book that continues to be the most interesting thing to think about for me is not like the book itself, but what needs to be done to get the book written. What kind of person do you need to be to write this book? In what ways do you need to trick yourself in order to write this book? I feel like that to me is what I think the most about. I don't actually think as much about plot or character. I like inventing the self that makes that book.
And so how do you invent the person who can get writing done? Well, first, you need to plan for at least 2 months of serious self-discipline. That's about the amount of time that it takes to form a new habit. Some studies say 3 months, other studies say 6 weeks, but I think the safest bet is to plan for at least 2 months of a serious self-discipline where you're ruthless, like you are consciously shielding and protecting this little seedling of a plant that you're growing here, right? You want it to have firm roots in the ground, but right now it's a seedling and you need to protect it from invasive species and deer who are coming to nibble away at this, not only this writing habit, but this alter ego that you're developing. When should you write? Well, I recommend writing in the morning. Other people might come along with different strategies, but look, this is what works for me. Why does it work? Well, one, willpower is like a muscle that gets tired throughout the day. So you wake up with a full tank and by evening, you're running on fumes. And so if you have this reservoir of willpower when you wake up in the morning, then use it on this most important task, your writing. And second, just getting writing done early in the morning makes the rest of your day feel like a victory lap. If you've ever tried to enjoy your evening when you know that you still have something to write, it's impossible. But if you finish your writing in the morning, then everything else feels like a reward. How long should you write during these daily writing sessions? Well, I think 30 minutes a day is fantastic if you're busy. And if you can manage an hour on your good days, then you're doing great. During busy periods when I'm teaching, I'll write in 3 90-minute sessions with breaks in between, just as I'm waiting between classes. But honestly, the exact timing doesn't matter as much as having a pattern. It's just about finding something that works for you. Some people like doing this Pomodoro technique where you use these 25-minute timers of, focused work and then a 5-minute break. One tactic that I was using this winter was this chess timer. This is actually kind of cool. I'm not using it so much these days, but during the winter holiday, whenever I was off from school, I had a lot more time to write during the day. And so I would use this chess timer. I'd have 4 hours here and 4.5 hours there. And my goal was to have 4 hours of concentrated writing time. And so I would just have this timer going and it would count down. And anytime I took this would be the break timer. So anytime I took the slightest break, I would just flip that on. And then I would have 4.5 hour as a break and 4 hours of concentrated writing time. And so the goal was just to count down the 4 hours before the 4.5 hours counted down. And so it kind of gamified it for me. I did that for a few months. It worked great. But the point here is just to find what works for you, but make it consistent. Consistency is everything, especially as you're developing this new practice. It can be helpful to tell people about your pattern, but be careful. Whenever you announce it to people, if you write about it on social media or something like that, or you tell people in your life, don't focus on the outcome. Don't tell people that you're writing a book. Tell people that you are writing for 90 minutes a day. I've seen people who announce kind of grand projects they're going to be taking on. And I've heard that there's this psychological phenomena where your brain can't really tell the difference between pursuing a goal and announcing that you're going to achieve it. And so you kind of like tap out some of your emotional reserves or something like that. But also it can just kind of make this feel like so much bigger of an undertaking than it really needs to be. So don't tell people what your project is necessarily, but do tell people about the habit that you're starting to develop. Because I think when you narrate your process to other people, it becomes real. Like it stands outside of your mood and motivation. There have been times when I become quite inspired and I set out big 90-day writing goals for myself, and inevitably that peters out. So it's quite helpful to have somebody to hold you accountable, and it's great if they can follow up with you and just kind of hold you to it. How much should you write? Well, word counts can be tricky. If it works for you, that's great. I used to obsess over word counts, but honestly, that made me crazy. So now I just aim for about 2 pages a day whenever I have the time. And if that's not working for me, I'll just focus on completing my writing sessions. You know, Jerry Seinfeld has, whenever he was developing his writing practice, he would set a timer for, I don't remember how long, 2 hours or something like that. And his rule was that he didn't have to write during this time, but he couldn't do anything other than write. And so if you're really not hitting your writing goals, if you really can't hit that word count, then it's quite enough to just sit in that undistracted time that's reserved for writing. After a very short period of doing nothing, if you're not allowing yourself to switch between Twitter and other distracting elements, and you're just sitting there with the writing, well, eventually you're going to find something to write about. Some days you're going to need to revise what you've already written before moving forward, and that counts too. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but we don't have to think about writing as being this purely novel output thing. Writing is recursive, so we'll come back to that in a moment. But for now, let's just do a little arithmetic, all right? So if you can average just 2 pages a day during these focused writing periods, then you can finish a book draft in about 4 to 5 months, right? So if you want to write 1,000 words a day, which is about 2 pages, break that down into 250 words. You want 4 writing sessions of 250 words. So if you have these 25-minute writing sessions, that's 10 words a minute. So do you think that in a 25-minute writing session, you could handle writing 1 sentence or 10 words per minute? If you can just break it down to that level, write 10 words a minute for 2 hours. That'll give you enough for a rough draft of a manuscript. But honestly, the best thing about developing this daily writing habit isn't just the pages that you produce. It's actually knowing when you're allowed to stop. Like, if you don't have these guardrails on your writing practice, then it's very easy to constantly feel guilty about all the time and all the days when you could have been writing more. But once you establish this daily writing practice, then it's very easy to know exactly when you're finished. So you just show up, start your timer, 10 words a minute, hit your time goal or your word goal, and then you can enjoy the rest of your day without this nagging voice telling you that you should be working. That's why I write in a specific place as well. It just helps to build the habit, but it also creates clear boundaries because whenever I'm not in my writing space, I'm not supposed to be working. I'm free to actually live my life. But let's be honest, whether you are writing for a time goal or you're aiming for a word count, there are going to be days when you miss your goal, and we need to learn how to manage those days because unmet goals do not create habits. There's a story about Victor Hugo, who used to have himself locked in his room, and he ordered his servants to only let him out whenever he would pass the finished pages, whatever his daily output goal was, underneath the door. That was the only way that he could open that door. And that might be a little bit extreme, but it does illustrate this idea of the goal being non-negotiable. You do want that kind of container for your practice, something that will not let you break out of it. But of course, you don't want to be extreme about this. And so, well, like him or hate him, I think there's a really good take on this principle that comes from Jordan Peterson.
Aim low. And I don't mean don't aim. And I don't mean don't aim up. You can set yourself a goal that you can attain. And there's not going to be much glory in it to begin with. It's one step on a very long journey. And so it starts to compound on you. So a small step today puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. And then that puts you in a position to take a slightly bigger step the next day. And you do that for 2 or 3 years, man, you're starting to stride.
All right, so aim low. Like, you absolutely have to focus on small, easily achievable goals. Don't plan to write 2,000 words a day. Don't try to write for 4 hours straight. Just focus on slow and steady. Because your goal is not to become this writing machine like Stephen King, who just has this incredible output. Your job is to become a goal-meeting person. Remember, you are trying to invent the person who can get writing done, and that person meets goals. In the book Atomic Habits, James Clear tells this story of somebody who is trying to develop the habit of going to the gym. And for the first couple of weeks, he actually would go to the gym and not work out. He would go to the gym, get into his clothes, and then pack them up and go back home. And that's because it wasn't about the exercise. It was about transforming himself into a gym-going person. And so that's what we really need to do at the beginning. It's like, start small. Can you have 15 minutes of totally focused time? Can you write 1 sentence a day? Can you become a goal-meeting person? It doesn't matter what the goal is, because if you can just meet these small goals, then it creates this pattern of self-motivation and reward that will keep you moving forward. And look, missing the occasional goal is not going to hurt your habit building, but making a huge deal out of it, that's what kills your momentum. So here's how you can start making small goals and meeting them. First, you've got to forgive yourself immediately whenever you miss a day. You don't abandon a diet because you had a burger at a barbecue. You don't quit learning guitar because you missed practice on Tuesday. Don't let these small lapses destroy the whole system. Second, look forward. Like, if you can't shake the guilt, just focus on meeting today's goal and feeling good about it. Third, do not add today's gap to tomorrow's task. Like, if you had a goal of 500 words and you only wrote 300 words today, that doesn't mean that you have to write 700 words tomorrow. And I think this is where goals and habit systems get destroyed, because it's a lot harder to sit down to write 700 words than it is 500 words. So if you carry today's gap to tomorrow's goal, then you're just going to make the habit that much harder to start. Those extra words have a way of spiraling out of control, and pretty soon you're looking at a day where you think you need to catch up by writing 3,000 words. And you need to find ways to celebrate whenever you hit your targets. That could mean taking a day off if you meet your writing goal, or you could just have a day where you write, but you're not tracking anything. And so you kind of rejuvenate the freedom that you feel in the craft. Some of my best work has come from these bonus days where I was just writing for the joy of it. Finally, just go easy on yourself. I don't know who needs to hear this. Maybe I'm just talking to myself with this one, but there might be others of you out there who get this kind of self-disciplining drill sergeant voice in your ear. And I think we just need to let go of all that and focus on building the habit. Right? One danger in this world of writing advice is that we can try to trap ourselves in these routines and, brick our phone and be like Hugo and lock ourselves in a room. And this can be very self-destructive and destructive to the practice as well. Like, I really think for this to work, it has to be fun, and writing is fun. This whole video is talking about the fear of writing and the pain of it all, and so many writers really like to talk about that loneliness and isolation, but God, for this to work, it has to be fun, right? You don't hear painters talking about the torment of going to their studio and playing with the paint. You don't hear sculptors talk about it, okay? The writing is our craft, and we need to find some joy and freedom in it for this to be a sustainable relationship. Like, I don't want to live in a world where part of me is constantly screaming at another part of me, like some deranged drill sergeant. And like, this part of you that wants to write, that's a good part of you. We want to nurture that part of you. So you don't want to turn your relationship with that part of yourself and with your writing into this negative experience. We really need to, as we're developing this habit system, the point is through the habit to discover the pleasure of writing. That's why we're doing this. And so treat yourself or that part of you like someone you actually care about, someone you want to nurture, and somebody you want to feel comfortable and welcome back the next time. And look, you're going to get stuck. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Sometimes you're going to get stuck on the big picture. You might be a few weeks into a project and suddenly you think, this is garbage, the whole premise is flawed, I need to start over. Other times you'll get stuck in the moment of your writing practice. You'll be sitting there staring at a screen, feeling like you're moving backwards, unable to write a single line. And the solution to both problems is exactly the same. Keep writing. For those moments when you're stuck in the middle of a writing session, try this. Open a new document and just start typing whatever's in your head for 5 or 10 minutes. Usually I'll begin with something like, okay, I'm stuck on this piece and I can't figure out how to ... Right? Whatever you do, just don't stop typing. Just as a quick analogy here, this is a practice that I teach in my English as a foreign language class. I work with students here in Korea who have high knowledge of English and low fluency. So they know they can pass tests, but they have a hard time expressing themselves and they get stuck just like you and I do. And so this is actually a very easy problem to fix. And after a few of these writing sessions, this is fluency. Their fluency increases exponentially. And so what you do is you just set a timer and you write anything that comes to mind. Anything. You could repeat yourself if you want. You could write, I don't know what to write about if you want. You could write, I am trying to write about this and I'm feeling stuck about that. It almost doesn't matter. The point is that it's just this fresh writing session where your only goal is to not stop typing. Now, of course, you want to be writing coherently. You want to be writing sentences and not just random. You're not just smashing the keyboard, if you follow my drift. But the point is that it doesn't matter what you write so long as you don't stop writing. And after 5 or 10 minutes of this, you're often going to find your way into a solution, or at least that you'll notice that your rambling suddenly starts to veer into actual focused writing. And soon you're back in the flow of your real project. And this is an important substitution because my impulse whenever I feel stuck writing is to get up, walk away from the computer, go to the kitchen, and have a spoonful of peanut butter. That's my coping mechanism for this feeling of being stuck. But now, whenever I feel my legs starting to lift me out of the chair, I just make myself sit there for 5 or 10 minutes more and write a few random sentences. 9 times out of 10, this breaks me through. Now, for bigger problems, whenever you've lost faith in the whole project, try this. Go back and reread everything that you've written. Now, don't just skim it, really read it like you're encountering it for the first time. And what I often find when I do this is that it's better than you thought, or you're gonna start to see exactly where things are going sideways. The problem here is that as a writer, you're experiencing this text as a writer. And so the way this process works is you go back to the beginning and experience it as a reader, going through line by line, not just skimming it, but really kind of reading it and trying to follow the thought process of the person who wrote it. Because as you go through those sentences, you'll start to encounter their thought process, and you'll start to see where they went wrong. And once you've done this, what you can do is write an outline of what you actually have and not just what you plan to write. As you've been reading this, you're now encountering it as a reader would, and so you can start to describe the logic that you see developing. This is going to help you identify where the holes are and the parts that you need to fill in, and you'll start to see, oh, well, wait a second, this part doesn't belong there, and then you start to discover where the whole piece started going sideways. So this is a matter of changing your perspective from the sentence level to the structure level, and once you can perceive that structure in those larger units of discourse, then you can start to fix it. Whenever you get these macro problems where you feel like a piece just isn't working, that's usually not something that you can resolve at the sentence level. You need to resolve it at the structural level. And so what this practice lets you do is start to identify the structure, and you can start to see where things aren't really fitting together in these larger units of discourse. Now, if you've tried both of those techniques and you're still stuck, then it can often be helpful to find somebody to talk through it with. And this is where a lot of us mess up. We only want to show our work when we're proud of it. And in my writing consultations, I can often tell when writers are struggling because they start avoiding certain parts of feedback. Like their work isn't going well, so they start to feel guilty about that, and they want to solve everything before anyone sees it. But that's like going to the doctor only when you're healthy. Like, if you don't share your struggles, then nobody can help you through them. So you want to find people whose opinions you can trust and who can give you the kind of advice that actually helps. Sometimes that can be a writing group, and if you have one of these, then count yourself really lucky. But I've got to say, like, whenever these groups get too big, like more than 3 or 4 people, the advice generally gets a little bit too polite and too vague. The best is sharing one-on-one if you can find somebody to do it. This can be close friends or just anybody who will tell you the truth. But above all, the point here is just to not give up. We writers have evolved beyond basic procrastination. We're not binge watching Netflix or scrolling TikTok for hours. We're more refined than that. No, that won't do. We have moved on to the advanced stuff. Call it virtuous procrastination. You know what I'm talking about. Cleaning the house instead of writing, organizing your desk. These things feel productive, so they don't trigger the same guilt as obvious time wasting. But the truth is, if writing terrifies you, then cleaning your house feels like a vacation. Yes, it's the messy desk that stopped me from writing. The dishes in the sink, that's what'll get me writing. But the fact is that you probably created that mess unconsciously to avoid sitting down at your computer. The sneakiest form of virtuous procrastination is work that feels important. And so the appeal here is obvious. These tasks make you feel productive, and they have deadlines and clear outcomes, which is a lot better than the kind of vague, never-ending toil that we have whenever we're writing. Like writing, by contrast, it makes you feel uncertain and vulnerable. And until the piece is done, it's not really serving anybody else except for you and your vision. If you're an indie writer, then nobody's demanding that you publish that piece today except you. And you are the easiest person to convince otherwise. And since you're a one-person business, marketing and writing are both part of building your platform. So it's easy to convince yourself that spending 3 hours on your Instagram strategy or catching up on the news on Twitter is just as valuable as writing, but it's not. You're choosing the easier task because it feels safer and it mitigates your fear of writing. I swear, my job as a writing coach is like 90% psychology. And so, of course, all of these things are part of your business, and I'm not going to say here that you should neglect them. Do a decent job with the business stuff, but don't forget what you actually want to be known for. You want to be known for your business strategy, your SEO? No. You want to be known for your ideas, for your voice and your perspective. And that only comes from one place: sitting down and getting writing done. But the flip side of this problem is just as dangerous. That's writers who can't stop working on their projects. These writers get stuck in endless research and revision cycles because they're terrified of putting their work out there. So as long as it's not finished, it can't be judged. Oh God, I went through this so much in university, and professors would always give me deadlines. I just need a few more days and then my term paper will be perfect. But I swear that's like giving a drunk a drink. And the logic here is quite clever, because as long as more research could be done, then the work is still in its perfect potential. You know, that flawless piece that you have in your imagination. It stays there, crystallized, instead of coming into the world in its flawed form. So look, whatever you're working on, it's not your magnum opus. It's just your next work. And one thing I've been discovering in this practice of writing and making videos online is that letting it go and having it be evaluated, as painful as that moment is, will teach you so much more about writing than another month of polishing. Now look, you're going to procrastinate. You're human. You're going to find creative ways to avoid the hard work all the time. But the goal is getting better at catching yourself sooner. And full transparency, of course, I still procrastinate. Usually I do it by reading too much or letting admin tasks eat up my time. The only difference is that I recognize it faster now, and I have habits that pull me back to the actual writing. One of the best tools here is talking to other writers about how your work is going. In my case, I have a colleague that I can talk to, and it's just so funny. Like, the lies you tell yourself to avoid the fear of writing just sound ridiculous whenever you say them out loud to someone else. Like, hey, how'd that newsletter go last week? Oh, I couldn't work on it because I need to redesign my website first. Oh, I'm not ready to publish it because I haven't done enough research. Do you hear how silly that sounds? Good. Now go write something. But you're still here, aren't you? And you're still afraid of writing. Well, a lot of people think that the goal is to stop being afraid of writing. But in this video, I'm saying something completely different. I'm saying any writing that aims to be great will always be frightening. Like, if you're aiming for greatness, if you're aiming for that great vision of something that you have in your mind, that vision is going to challenge you to do your best work. And it forces you to face the possibility that you might not live up to those dreams. And so that fear of writing is not going anywhere. I mean, I suppose maybe somewhere out there's a writer who feels no fear, but I imagine fearless writing as complacent writing. And look, to be frank, there are a lot of writers out there, you can probably think of a few, who are just too confident and too sure of themselves to be surprised by any new ideas. So these supremely confident writers, the ones who never feel fear before they hit publish, there's nothing you can learn from them. And that's the reason why no one fears writing emails, because they don't aim for perfection. They just aim for information transfer. But the best writing, the kind of writing that I think you and I are aspiring to, is that which generates new knowledge. It causes a surprise discovery in the writer, and it's written in such a way to deliver that discovery as a gift to the reader. That kind of writing is always going to be driven by fear. And I don't think we're ever really going to extinguish that fear. It's tied in with the aspiration of writing something true and valuable. So instead, what we need to do is make fear an ally, right? So if you really think about this fear as a character or like an animating force within you, then you want to not fight it, but instead use it as signal. Oh, there's this great quote by a Buddhist nun named Pema Chodron, and she says something like, fear is a signal that you're moving closer to the truth. All right, so whenever you feel that fear, don't fight it, but use it to show you the opportunities in your work. All right, and whenever you're stuck and you're trying to break through it in one of these quick writing sessions, what you can ask yourself is, what am I most afraid of here? What scares me about this paragraph? Why am I stuck here? I now have an image of like somebody on the beach with, one of those beach combers with a metal detector, right? Like, fear should be the beep, 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 that you're uncovering something valuable here. And so you should write about that fear and follow its thread, because underneath it, like, it's linked to something. It's linked to something important. Instead of seeing it as an obstacle, imagine it pointing to the most interesting problem in your work. All right, and here's another way that you can use fear in your writing. Keep enough of it alive to make your writing interesting. Like, we always say writing is thinking. But if that's true, like, if you really believe that, then it's also true that if you sit down and you know already what your conclusion is, then what's the point of writing that? There's no discovery. There's no thought in it. The idea is dead on arrival. Maybe this is just a personal preference, but I prefer writing that stays open to learning something new. Now, sometimes whenever I'm writing and I'm a few pages into a piece, I'll stumble onto a really good idea. One that would be a perfect ending for the whole piece. Now, if this ever happens to you, I think the instinct is to save it and then build towards it. Writing confidently, knowing where you're going to finish the piece. But these days, whenever that happens, I force myself to write that idea down immediately, right there on the page. And so instead of saving this best piece for last, I just kind of position it as it occurs to me. And this forces me to find something even better for the ending. I mean, that's the rule, right? Like, your best idea can't be buried there in the middle. And so as a little challenge to myself, like, if this gem of an idea is positioned there in the middle of a piece, then I have to keep thinking and keep discovering discovering. This kind of writing is like Wile E. Coyote, running off the cliff and then building the bridge frantically just ahead of my feet. Now, there is a piece of writing advice that we need to address, and that is about being concise. Every writing guide out there will tell you to cut ruthlessly, use fewer words, trim the fat, and this advice isn't wrong, but it misses something crucial. You cannot worry about concision when you've just started writing. Think about it like money. Whenever you're broke, buying someone lunch feels impossible because you barely have enough to feed yourself. But whenever you're rich, you can pick up the check for everyone at the table. It's the same thing with writing. You can only afford to cut when you have plenty to spare. Like cutting 10 pages from a 20-page draft is a disaster, but it's not really a big deal to cut 50 pages from a 200-page manuscript. So I've found that if you start following this advice of concision and pruning too early, then you're going to slow yourself down and miss the chance that one of those wordy paragraphs contains the next big idea. Like this advice about concision, it's a good point of writing style, but I think in practice, it becomes this dangerous psychological pattern where it becomes almost like self-punishment disguised as virtue. It's almost like writing anorexia. You're holding yourself to these impossible standards that nobody else believes in. No matter what you're writing, I think it's really important to write without knowing exactly how things are going to turn out. You've really got to let yourself learn as you go and follow ideas wherever they lead, wherever they come from, who knows? This is a mode that I call shifting between the artist and the architect. The artist is just a channel for these ideas to come through. And it's really important to give them life and give them space and just get out of their way. And then eventually you can step back as the architect and see how everything hangs together. Some pages aren't going to fit in the final shape, and that's fine. But by that point, you'll have so much material that you can afford to be generous with your cuts. Now, one piece of advice I came across recently is that there needs to be a separation between writing and revision. First you write, then you fix what's broken. But as anybody who actually understands writing can confirm, that's completely backwards if you want to create something meaningful. Real writing is recursive. Whenever I work, I pause after each section or paragraph, read back what I've written, and this helps me see what I've actually accomplished and start mapping the shape of the whole piece. But more importantly, it helps me find my best ideas. Now, since I don't really censor much in my first drafts, my writing usually contains multiple ideas, some that are connected to others that are just floating around orphaned. And whenever I reread and revise, I hunt for these strongest thoughts and start building the structure around those concepts. The weaker stuff just gets cut or saved for later. So this process of free writing and then hunting for the key ideas and structuring, this creates a feedback loop. The structure that emerges from the revision shows me where the next sections need to go. The closer I get to finishing, the more I understand what the piece needs to be complete. So here's what this means practically. If you write this way, then revision isn't something that happens after writing. Revision is writing. The act of revision creates the text just as much as those first sentences that you put down. Most people learn about editing and revision in school as fixing whatever the teacher marked as wrong. So correcting grammar or maybe adding a paragraph here or there. And I think that teaches you two things. One, it teaches you that revision is something that happens to a static, complete text. And two, it teaches you that revision happens at a separate moment from the writing process. But real revision is dynamic. It's discovering what you actually are trying to say. And I'm going to go farther and say that it might actually be helpful to think of research in the same way. Like I used to separate research days from writing days, but the more I think about it, the more that's totally artificial. Some of your best ideas might come from browsing, reading, or just taking notes. And I think it's only fair to treat those moments of discovery as part of the writing process itself. So consider giving yourself credit for research as part of your writing practice. Include it in your goals and your habits, and if you need to spend 2 hours reading and taking notes, I think that counts as writing time. But be careful. research is also one of the classic forms of virtuous procrastination. So what's the difference between productive research and procrastination? Well, I think it's whether the research is moving your current project forward or if it's just making you feel busy. When you're reading to understand something specific, something that your piece needs, that's writing. But when you're reading just because you're trying to avoid the negative feelings connected to the blank page, that's avoidance. So I think the key here is just integration. Writing, researching, revising, they're all part of the same idea generation process. They all involve discovery and they all move your work forward. So stop thinking of revision as cleanup duty and start thinking of it as the place where your real ideas emerge. Finally, last point, I just need to say that, this genre that we're kind of in here on writing YouTube, this genre of writing advice, it's really like self-help for writers. We read guides to writing by Stephen King or Annie Dillard because we think that it has the secret that we need to get unstuck. But the simple fact is that the thing that's got you stuck is fear. So take this advice. I'm going to be honest with you. Most of the people won't actually try any of the things that we've shared in this video. I've worked with writers who listen to these ideas with genuine excitement. They nod along and say, yes, writing every day, 30 minutes, sounds perfect. Yes, I'm totally going to do that. And they don't. And I think this happens for two reasons. First, they don't quite believe I actually do these things myself. And so they think this advice is maybe for beginners, for people who don't have their act together. And since their goal is eventually to not need systems and habits, they figure that they should start practicing the advanced stuff right now. But of course, this is completely backwards. Whenever I'm working on something important, I do everything that I've described here exactly as I've described it. And this really is my grown-up professional writing practice for whatever it's worth. I'm not making up training wheels for amateurs. And the second reason why I think they don't follow this advice is that following it consistently is hard. As we said at the beginning, it takes about 2 months to build an automatic habit. That's 2 months of serious willpower and discipline with constant opportunities to backslide, get caught in emotional traps, or just get taken over by new priorities. So I get it. This stuff is hard, but here's what you need to know. It does get easier. Not easy, but easier. The habits become more automatic and the resistance that you feel becomes less strong, and you start to trust that the process works. So the only advice that I can give you is to trust yourself enough to try it. Start small. Pick one thing and commit to it for a week. If that works, try another week. Don't let small lapses convince you to give up entirely. And please be good to yourself. Make friends with your anxiety and your fear. Don't fight them. That's part of you and they're trying to tell you something. And remember that every professional writer who you admire has felt exactly what you're feeling right now. They might not admit to it in their author interviews in print, but be assured they do. And the only difference between the professional writers and the ones who want to write is that they kept going. So start small, really small. Write a comment below and let me know which one of these tips you're going to try. 1,000 words a day, it's not much, but it's honest work and should hopefully get you started writing today. But you might be tempted to speed this up by outsourcing the work of writing to AI. And while that does punch up your word count, it's also going to dilute the value of your writing. So watch this video next because it's going to give you my plug and play system for writing valuable nonfiction without AI. So be sure to go check it out.